Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare. Is it working? Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare.
I'm going to speak a little bit. I'd like to first introduce His Holiness Rtadhvaja Swami, who is with us this evening. And Rtadhvaja Maharaj and I oftentimes get together in different places, and he's come to Boston for a week, or Boston and Hartford. And he's here with us this evening. He's formerly was it in Alachua? What was the ashram called? Huh? The boys' ashram. Huh? I know. I thought there was a name for it though. Vaishnava Academy. But now, currently, he is traveling in places like China, in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and also in America. He travels to Texas, Florida, Tennessee, and Georgia. And now he's currently in Boston. So we're going to ask him if he would begin speaking this evening. We're going to speak from the Bhagavad Gita, I believe, right? Would you please come and sit there?
Before I begin, is there anybody here for the first time that we can recognize that has never been here before? Okay, so this is second comer. As Brahmatirtha, I don't know if you all know Brahmatirtha, but he'd always say, is anybody here for the last time? I thought to speak about a few things, and one came to mind, was from the introduction of Bhagavad Gita, and then I would go from there, and time permitting, we have to be done by 6 o'clock, right? In this introduction, Srila Prabhupada asks or brings up the point that Um, the Bhagavad Gita, he asks, what is it? And he begins by describing the purport or the purpose of Bhagavad Gita. And that is to deliver mankind from the nescience of material existence. So there are several things in that statement. The idea is that we are caught in this nescience. Nescience means ignorance. And that ignorance is a very simple thing to understand. Does anybody know what it is? Since you've been here before, maybe you've heard it. Nescience or ignorance is to identify oneself to be this body when in fact he is consciousness, the soul. So, I'll give an example that I was just fixing my phone, calling AT&T, and they fixed my phone via the computer, and the lady asked me, she said, is there any other questions you have? So I said, just one. I woke up this morning around 4:30, and I said to myself, self, you're 61. And then I said, but I used to have a body that was 6, and that body is now gone. Then I had a 10-year-old body, and that's gone. And a 20-year-old and a 40-year-old, both those are gone. And now I'm in a 60-year-old body, and I'm the same person, but I'm in a different body. So I must be something different than this body. So I said I was thinking about it for a while, and I began to understand that I'm just conscious of whatever body I'm in. And I said, if I'm not this body, and I'm consciousness, then there must be a conscious entity from which I've come. And I'm trying to figure out what my relationship with that supreme or conscious entity is. If you could please answer that question, I would appreciate it very much. And her response was, that is one of the most amazing things I've ever heard in my life. And it is true, I agree. We can't be these bodies. We have to be the consciousness, we're the consciousness in. What that consciousness is, and where that consciousness goes, and who it actually belongs to, that's a question that we get the answer in the Bhagavad Gita. So, when we want to understand this point, we can go through practically any part of the Bhagavad Gita. Maharaj asked me what part I would speak on. I said probably the 3rd chapter. But when we think about it, those of us who are readers of the Bhagavad Gita understand that from the very beginning, Krishna was telling Arjuna to understand this simple point. Understand this point, that as this body changes, the soul does not change. It remains the same. It may go from childhood to youth, adulthood to old age, and then we get another body, because we're conscious through all those bodies. So we've already reincarnated so many times, because they say all the cells in the body change every 7 or 8 years. So at 61, I'm on my 7th and a half, or 8th, or whatever it is, incarnation. If a friend of mine that I knew when I was 5 walked down the street and we hadn't seen each other for 55 years, I wouldn't know who he is and he wouldn't know who I was. Because we wouldn't recognize each other. Why? Different bodies. Very simple point to understand. So in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna he asked Krishna to clarify everything that he said in the 2nd chapter. The 2nd chapter, Krishna goes through a whole, what we call the contents of the Gita summarized. And he touches on a lot of things. And Arjuna is a little bewildered because he doesn't understand why Krishna wants to engage him in a warfare which he thinks may cause misfortune. So Krishna begins to explain so many things. And he gets to the point where, right in the beginning, he says that this acts of sacrifice, because every living entity is active. In the 5th verse of this chapter, Prabhupada describes in the purport, it's not a matter of being embodied. It's the natural natural activity of the soul to be active. So, and it's the actual activity of the body, or the nature of the body, is that it is inactive. It's just like if we take the battery out of the computer, it doesn't work. Or to take the battery out of your watch, or take the battery out of the camera, it doesn't work. It's just I don't want to say a dead camera, but I don't know what do you call it? An inanimate object. And this, then once you put the battery in, then it acts like a camera. So in the same way, we're a soul. We are the soul. And depending on what kind of body we have, we act like that. You put the soul inside a monkey, it acts like a monkey. And then you see, when they have monkeys do things that human beings do, like they dress them up with little hats and have them do things, everybody's amused. Why? Because he's not acting like a monkey, he's acting like a human. Even Srila Prabhupada, our teacher, gave the example that dogs are barking everywhere. But if some man creates a comedy scene on the stage where he just barks like a dog, everybody will come and pay money when you can get it for free from a regular dog. So in the middle of the 3rd chapter, Krishna tells Arjuna that the spirit soul is bewildered by the influence of false ego and thinks himself to be the doer of activities which are in actuality carried out by the modes of material nature. Now here we have again this bewildered soul. And again, what is that bewilderment? This is the 2nd time I asked the question. Yeah, that bewilderment is that we think that we're this body, but we're not. It's just like my sister. She's a nurse. Well, she's retired, but she's a nurse. So when she finished her nursing the courses, they had to go to the state, what do they call it? No, where people who are not all there, state asylum, to practice their nursing. I guess they were the victims or whatever. They went to the state mental institution to begin their regular practice. That's what they had to do for 6 months. So she told me that there was a man in there that thought he was Napoleon Bonaparte. And he would not take his medicines, he would not eat, he would not go to sleep. And then she said, "Mr. Bonaparte, it's time for breakfast." "Oh, thank you very much." "And Mr. Bonaparte, it's time to take this." "Okay, thank you very much." If you called him by his real name, he wouldn't respond. Now, if I think that I'm Robert Maben from Minot, North Dakota. What is the difference? That's not who I am. I am a spirit soul, and part and parcel. And my Vangso, Jiva Loka, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. I'm an eternal part of God that has an eternal relationship with Him. And if I think that I'm, Rtadhvaja Swami or this body somehow identified with, what's the difference? Of me misidentifying myself this way or him misidentifying himself that way. We're both misidentifying ourselves. But I guess in this world, we just put a limit on how crazy we can be. You know that story Prabhupada told in India. There was a physician and his wife was implicated with the servant. So the doctor, as Prabhupada used the word, brutally killed him in the operating room, and then packed him up in a box and put him in the trunk of the car and was driving away. And a policeman happened to notice the blood coming out of the back of the car and stopped him, and he was arrested. And the judge called. They went in, and his what do they call it when you make an excuse? His in law terms. Yeah, his plea was, I was temporarily insane. So the judge called in the civil servant physician to examine him. And after examining him for several weeks, he came back and the judge said, what is your opinion? He said, my opinion, Your Honor, is, or my Lord, I guess it would be in India, is that everybody in this world is crazy. We just have to decide if this person is crazy enough to do this or not crazy enough to do this. Prabhupada gave an example. There's two types of people in this world. There's a fool and there's the thief. You know this example? You walk into the bank and you say, I renounce all the money in the bank. The money doesn't belong to you in the first place. There's only a fool will come in there and say, only somebody who was a little touched, and say, all this money belongs to me. And then the other one is the opposite, is the thief. He walks in and says, it's all mine, give it to me. So there's two choices. Are we a fool or a thief? So we take a look around this world, and we can see that due to the influence of the false ego, and it's real nice how Prabhupada does this in this chapter, because he slowly explains, or Krishna explains, the nature of these things. When you get to the point towards the end of the chapter where Arjuna is curious as to why someone would commit a sinful activity even if he knew better. And Krishna says it is karma. Kama esha, kodesha. This desire or lust, which is the all-devouring enemy, the sinful enemy of this world. So it's described there in this section that the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust or desire. And through this desire, material desire, it covers the real knowledge of the living entity. What is that real knowledge? I'm spirit soul, I'm part of God, I'm meant to serve God. That's what we've forgotten. That's what bewilders him. So Prabhupada explains that Krishna here is giving very good information to Arjuna, because if you're going to have to, those who are interested in self-realization, if they know where the problem lies, they can work on it. Just as if you know where your enemy is in a battle, if you have good information, then it's good. So Prabhupada writes in this commentary that the enemy, which is this desire, our karma, has captured different strategic positions in the body of the conditioned soul. The mind, the intelligence, and the senses. These are the three places that this calm has conquered. It is sitting there, and it is working on the mind, through the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. So Prabhupada explains this very, very simple, that one who wants to conquer this enemy must first of all understand that the mind is the center of all activities for the senses. The senses are like little satellite computers that just bring in information. It smells like this, it tastes like this, it looks like this, it sounds like this, it tastes, touch, feels like this. And they're like little, they're called knowledge acquiring senses, and they just bring in information. And then the mind generally becomes the reservoir of all ideas for sense gratification, according to our body. And everybody's, I always have a hard time saying this, everybody's body is different than everybody else's body. Nobody has the same exact body. Someone may like eggplant, someone may not like eggplant, someone may like this, someone may like that, someone may do this, someone may do that. Everybody's different. And according to your nature, and which is either goodness, passion, and ignorance, and a combination of those three, which they're always in competition, then your mind tells you, yes, I want this, I don't want that. I want this, I don't want that. Then, Prabhupada explains very nicely, next the intelligence department becomes captured, because becomes the capital of all the lustful or desireful propensities. The intelligence is the immediate next door neighbor to the soul, and because it becomes touched, then the living entity in that bewildered condition thinks that by engaging my senses in sense gratification, I'll become happy. And therefore they repeatedly engage, come on in, come in. They repeatedly engage in acts of sense gratification, and in that sense they become addicted. They become addicted to sense gratification in one shape or form or another, depending on which kind of body you have. You can imagine, if you take a look, there are so many different kinds of bodies. Yata prakashya eka Krishna lokamidam virvai, that just as the sun gives illumination to this universe, Kshetra tata Krishna prakati sadhava. That same way, the soul illumines the body with consciousness. So anything you see with consciousness, be it even an amoeba, has a soul. And that soul is engaging in the idea that I can enjoy somehow in this material world because I've come to the point where my false ego is identified. My ego, which is my real identity, has become a false ego or a false identification of something which I'm not. So this is very interesting because just like we have in America AA, I've never been Alcoholics Anonymous, and we have NA, Narcotics Anonymous. And so I have started in the Hare Krishna movement SGA, Sense Gratifiers Anonymous. And we have 12 steps. Well, I don't know all 12, I can't remember them all. But the first one begins by going before the deities and saying, "Good morning, my name is Rtadhvaja Swami. I'm an addict." So what are we addicted to? We're addicted to sense gratification. I remember one time I had some friends, they were in a rock and roll band called 108. It was a popular band in the straight edge days. They had a song that was called Slave. And the song went, don't tell me, because people will sometimes say that those who surrender to God give up all their freedom and become slaves to the religion, or the religious leader, or the God, or whatever you want to call it. So Raj Kishore would say, don't tell me, you're not a slave, because I see, you're addicted to your senses. At every moment, you take a look around, and we find ourselves bewildered. In the second chapter, Prabhupada said, in every step, there's perplexity. We don't know what's going to happen the next moment. So the person who is bewildered, he takes all credit for whatever he's doing. And there's a big difference between one who is in Krishna consciousness working and one who's not in Krishna consciousness working. Srila Prabhupada explains there's a gulf of difference between these two, because the result of the activity is going to a different place. One person is working in the factory just to get money, to gauge in sense gratification. The other one is working in the factory to support Krishna. His house is Krishna conscious, makes his family Krishna conscious, he comes to the temple, etc., etc. It's completely different. Now, there... Just take it. Okay. So, in this 27th verse, it describes the bewildered spirit soul. The one that thinks that he is the doer of activities. I'll give another example. Just like my mother used to go window shopping on Thursdays. Any ladies ever go window shopping? I probably go real shopping nowadays, but in the old days, they used to go window shopping to prepare for the next real day of shopping. So she would come home and after window shopping, and it was always a good day for the meal, because she would be just talking to my father. And she'd say, oh, I saw such a nice thing in the store today, could you please, can I please buy it? And he would say, sure. And so my father would provide the money or whatever. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, my mother would be window shopping again and say, oh, I just saw this beautiful dress, I just have to have it. And my father would say, didn't I just get you one 3 weeks ago? Oh, but I have nothing to wear. So the modes in nature, they change. We think that we're choosing that particular thing, but actually what's happening is that we have a particular mode in nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, a special combination, just like, what do you call that? Special ordered from Krishna for us to enjoy in a particular way in the material world, and along with that comes also our misfortune comes along with this also. So Krishna is now explaining to Arjuna that you always change. One day you want it, the next day you don't. I don't have anything to wear. Nothing to wear. That's the nice thing about being a sannyasi. You only have one thing to wear, you don't have a choice. We just had sannyasa initiation in Vrindavan for 2 young men, and one sannyasi, we all spoke a little bit, and one sannyasi says that when you take sannyas, you get a BMW. Now, what do you think about that? Anybody want to take sannyas? All you got to do is dedicate your body, mind, and words, and the jiva, yourself, to the service of the Supreme Lord. So body, B, mind, M, words, W, B, M, W. Body, mind, and words. That's what you get when you get sannyas. So now we'll go to the person who is not bewildered. That person who is in knowledge of the absolute truth. That person knows that the process of engaging oneself in sense gratification and the process of dedicating himself in devotional service are completely different. And the knower of the truth, he is convinced, just completely convinced of his awkward position in this material association. Very awkward position. Just like we were talking today. No, that's different. That's your sister. All your own is my own. So you can find yourself in an awkward position at any moment. We know as devotees, or those who are practicing Krishna consciousness, that we are part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because we are part and parcel of that Supreme Personality of Godhead, we should not be in this material creation. We're in the wrong place. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people. Now actually in this room, we're in the right place at the right time with the right people. But in the material sense, people are in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people. Because it is Durantya. It is a prison. So one is in cell block A, one is in cell block B, one is in cell block C, and one thinks that, oh, I'm in cell block A, I'm so much better. That's such a nice cell block. They give the example of a person who's shackled to the wall in the prison house. And the shackles are golden, and the bracelet, and what do they call the handcuff part? The clamps, they're covered with jewels and gems. So he just all day long, he's in jail and he's looking at the golden chains and the jewels and gems, and so, oh, this is really nice. It's such a nice thing. So wonderful. But he forgets he can't go anywhere. He's in prison. He's imprisoned in the material world. And he's subjected to different things that the material world has to offer. Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi. Birth, death, old age, disease. And you can't avoid them. People have been trying for thousands of years to avoid these things. It's time we give up material calculation and go for a spiritual calculation. Because the problem is not material. The problem is spiritual. Even Bhaktisiddhanta has made that statement. The real problem is the spiritual problem. That we're stuck in this material world. And when we're in that beginning, that what I was trying to look for in the introduction, Prabhupada writes that we are in an atmosphere. Although we are eternal, spirit souls, we're in an atmosphere of non-existence. It's a pretty good statement. Because nobody here gets out. The atmosphere is an atmosphere of non-existence. Because everything comes and everything goes. It changes at every moment. So, because the living entity in knowledge realizes that he's part and parcel of Krishna, he also understands that I'm full of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. And I have a form, I have a spiritual form in relationship to the Supreme Form, the Supreme Lord. But somehow or another, I've been entrapped in this material, conception of life. In our pure consciousness, we dovetail everything in the service of the Supreme Lord. That's what we try to do in this Hare Krishna movement. Engage people in utilizing their body, mind, and words. We want everybody here to have a BMW. We want body, mind, and words in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. Because by doing that, one is relieved of all and every problem of life, in one sense. Problems will still be there, but at least we know the route out. We're no longer caught in that little cage that the hamsters run around in. Which some people call the rat race. Not a very nice term. Not a very nice term at all. So, when one engages himself in Krishna consciousness, naturally all the unwanted things begin to disappear. And we naturally become unattached to the activities of material or material sense gratification or the material senses, and we give our life under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he becomes free from all reactions. This is a very simple explanation. Not to be bewildered. I'll give one more example and then I'll turn it over to Niranjana Maharaj. An example Prabhupada gives which is very easy to understand. You're driving down the road in your car and it breaks. And you get out of the car and you open up the hood and you look inside. And if I look inside, I go like this, right? I have no idea. Especially, when I was young, I had a little bit of idea, but now when I look inside, they're all computerized. I have absolutely no idea. But then the mechanic comes, and the mechanic opens the hood, and he moves a few things, and instantly the car runs. What's the difference? One's been trained, and one's been not trained. So the Krishna consciousness movement is here to help train everybody who is willing to be trained in how to see what's broken and how to fix it and make it run so we can go back home, back to God. That's what this Krishna consciousness movement is. So I'll stop a little bit and I'll let Maharaj have the second half, or second, third. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
I think Artik is at 6 o'clock. Is that correct? Excuse me? That last analogy Maharaj gave about the automobile reminded me of another analogy that Srila Prabhupada would oftentimes give about the person who identifies with his automobile. He gave the analogy to help make the distinction between a person who is the knower of the field of activities and who identifies with the body. The body is known as kshetra, and then the field of activities, and there's the kshetragya. Kshetragya is the person who is the knower of the field of activities. And then, of course, there is the Paramatma, the Super Soul, who is the knower of all fields of activities. And because the Super Soul is existing in all bodies, whereas the living entity is simply the knower of his own field. So he uses that example about the automobile. And he says it's just like a person who has invested a lot in his car. Oftentimes people, when they want to get a new car, in fact, just yesterday, somebody came to the temple, they wanted to have a puja for the new car. Car puja. And of course, their mentality is that they want to utilize it for the service of the Lord. But nonetheless, when there's a new car, usually there's a lot of effort that goes into purchasing it. Oftentimes people can't purchase a car full out with cash. They have to take a loan, and they have to pay back the loan, monthly installments, and then of course when they purchase a new car, they take out a contract for maintenance, because although it's a new car, in the course of time it requires maintenance. The oil needs to be changed, and after some significant mileage is put on it, oftentimes different parts need to be replaced. And Prabhupada explains that the person identifies with the car because of the amount of energy he invests into it. In the same way as a person, he has a body which is also a vehicle. The body is a vehicle which is meant to carry the living entity across the ocean of material existence to the other side. But if we invest a lot simply in the body, and when something happens to it, obviously, we identify with it. And Prabhupada used the example of like the soul and the super soul. The soul who identifies with the body, and the super soul who doesn't identify with the body, who simply is the Lord within the heart, who performs the function as a witness, and who gives sanction for the living entity to act according to his desires, and witnessing all his desires. So it says, just like this person who has his car, he's driving along, he picks up a passenger, and passenger gets in the car, and they continue driving, and all of a sudden they get into an accident. And the person who has invested a lot in that car, then he feels pain because of so much energy that he's invested into the car. He identifies with the car, he sees the big major dent in the front, and he thinks about all the payments that he still has to make for the car. He hasn't made them yet. Thinks about how much is his insurance going to cover. Does he have to give part of the insurance to pay it off? Does he get full coverage? And so many different things are going through the mind. But the passenger who he picked up doesn't feel that same, although he was in the car also, doesn't identify with in the same way as the owner of the car. So Maharaj was reading from this commentary, and he was saying that when a person engages himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness, he becomes naturally unattached to the activities of the material senses, which are all circumstantial and temporary. So the method of becoming detached, Prabhupada would oftentimes quote the verse Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janaya Yashu Vairagyam Gyanam Charam Ahiktukam. That by rendering devotional service to the Supreme Lord, Vasudeva, one automatically acquires knowledge and detachment from this world. It is very difficult simply with our mind and intelligence and by our own efforts alone to detach ourselves from this physical body. But Krishna, who is the super soul and who is the knower of the living entities, Krishna says, Vedaham samatitani, that I know all living entities. I know all things in the past. I know all living entities. I know all things that are yet to come. But me, nobody knows. And then he also says that I'm seated within everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Krishna, who is the super soul within the heart, he is actually the supreme knower, and the living entity who is, we said, the Kshetragya, the knower of the field of his activities, he only knows that which goes on in the physical body. And therefore, in order to know that which is beyond the physical material world and to become detached from this world, one actually has to awaken his attachment and understand his relationship with the Supreme. As Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita, for one who is not attached, for one who has no connection to the Supreme can have neither a controlled mind nor steady intelligence, without which there's no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? Therefore, Maharaj has been very elaborately describing, from reading of these verses of the Bhagavad Gita, the bewilderment of the living entity who engages from one day to the next only in trying to fulfill the demands of the physical body and the activities of the mind, which are also temporary. One has to go beyond the body, one has to go beyond the mind, and one actually has to follow the superior dictation, not to follow the dictation of the mind, which is, he also explained, the mind is a reservoir for all ideas for sense gratification. Krishna says, for one who has conquered the mind, super soul is reached and he attains tranquility. For such a man, heat and cold, happiness, distress, honor and dishonor, they're all the same. In other words, in order to be able to conquer the mind and transcend the dualities of this world, because dualities of this world are constantly bewildering the living entity. Is this good? Will this make me happy? Is this bad? Will I suffer from this? Every day we go through a whole series of questions and answers to ourselves and trying to make decisions that will bring us to a secure position. But the dualities of the material world are perpetual. And as we oftentimes give that example from the Srimad Bhagavatam, that the example is given that although the dualities of the material world do not ultimately exist, the conditioned soul considers them to be real due to the influence of his conditioned intelligence. The imaginary experience of a world which is separate from Krishna can be compared to the acts of dreaming and desiring. When the conditioned soul desires something at night, or he dreams of something he would like to have or avoid, he creates a reality which has no existence beyond his imagination. And this verse very clearly explains the nature of duality. And it gives a very simple analogy and example to help us understand how we identify with the dualities of this world due to seeing things separate from Krishna, because we're not connected with Krishna and therefore cannot be sufficiently detached. And the example is, just as a person has a terrible dream at night. If he has a terrible dream at night, and all of us had this experience, certainly. Anybody here has not had a dream at night? Just checking to make sure if this is analogy is. Has anybody here had a bad dream at night? Can you please raise your hand? Okay. So you know, you've had a bad dream at night. So generally, if you have a bad dream at night, when you wake up, you're happy. Why? It's a bad dream. You dream something very terrible, and when you wake up, you feel greatly relieved that, wow, it wasn't real. And then, has anybody ever had a good dream? Yes? Okay. So you know what I'm talking about. Good dreams too. Yes. So sometimes we have real nice dreams, and we don't want to wake up. And when we actually, of course, usually we don't know that we're sleeping during night dreams. I remember once I had a dream with Prabhupada. Anyways, I won't go into that one. It'll take us off into a tangent. But I didn't want to wake up, and I did, and I was very sad. But similarly, if we have a nice dream, we wake up, we feel very sad because it was only a dream. We're disturbed or upset. So this verse describes the nature of duality, that both the happiness And distress that we experience is not connected to reality. It's connected to a dream, which has no reality whatsoever. Yet, the happiness we feel when we wake up, because it was a bad dream, really feels good. And the distress that we feel when we wake up from a good dream, we feel terrible. But it's only connected to a dream. It has no connection with reality. And then that's, of course, the night dream. And then this verse goes on to explain that there are night dreams, and then there are daydreams. And the daydream is that when we dream of something we would like to have, or something we would like to avoid. Because naturally, by nature, that's how we daydream. Daydream when we project to thinking, yes, we work very hard because I know at the end of all this hard labor, there'll be something that I can really enjoy, that I really want. So there's the daydream when we think of something we would like to have or something we'd like to avoid, like something that's, everybody's trying to avoid old age and disease and death, and many other inconveniences of life that we always try to avoid, but somehow still manage to come. So this is duality. And the happiness and distress, he compares that just as a happiness and distress we feel, which is connected to the night dream, is no different than the happiness and distress that we feel towards the daydreams. They have no connection with reality. Because the reality is, we have nothing to do. And that's the whole essence of what Maharaj's talk is all about. We have nothing really to do in this material world. We have no real permanent connection to this body or to anything else which gratifies the immediate needs of this body. That's not connected to us. Yet we feel so much happiness or so much distress due to the amount of effort we make to invest in this body, corresponding to the amount of effort we make, just like the person who makes so much effort to maintain his car, to purchase his car, suffers so much because he's invested so much in the car. In the same way, to the degree that we invest so much in the body, we have to suffer the same experience, the same happiness and distress, which has no connection with reality. Reality is the happiness which is derived from understanding our relationship with the Supreme. And that happiness is a happiness which is given by Krishna himself. And that happiness is a happiness which is insurpassable, which is beyond the imagination of anyone in this material world. They cannot conceive. It's called Brahma Sokyam. Brahma Sokyam is real happiness, which is transcendental to material happiness, and which continues forever. So, therefore, our efforts in Krishna consciousness to become unattached can automatically be achieved by strengthening our connection with Krishna. That is it. It's not very difficult. Whereas if we try to detach ourselves from the body, from the activities of the mind, from sense gratification, by our own strength and by our own efforts, it's very hard. It's almost impossible. Arjuna says, Krishna says, what you're telling me to control this mind and senses, to me it sounds like more difficult to control the raging wind. Arjuna couldn't even accept that proposal to try to control the mind and senses by one's own effort alone. And therefore Krishna concludes that chapter by saying, Yogi nama pisavesham advitanantaratmana shadavan bhajate yomam same yukta mato mataha yukta tamo mataha. This is of all yogis, those who are endeavoring to control the mind and senses, of all yogis, one who abides in me in great faith worshipping me in devotional service, he's most intimately connected to me. And he's the highest of all. That is Krishna consciousness. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada has so wonderfully given this throughout the pages of Bhagavad Gita and all of his commentaries. And if we read Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada used to say, when you have a sweet ball, any place, oops, it's okay. Any place, sit down. Anywhere around the sweet ball you lick is just as sweet. One side, the other side, doesn't make the top, the bottom, it's all sweet. Prabhupada so wonderfully has made this Bhagavad Gita so sweet that any verse you read, every commentary is just giving us the glories of devotional service and the means to fulfill all of Krishna's instructions in the Bhagavad Gita, ultimately by surrendering everything to him and engaging our body, mind, and words in the service of Krishna. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. I think we're late for Artik. We should start.